sign of support for Sessions, who does not seem inclined to heed the advice of our next guest, House Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi, who has called for his resignation. Leader Pelosi, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
So let's start with President Trump's allegation, so far evidence-free, that President Obama sought to have him wiretapped during the campaign. You're part of the Gang of Eight. That's a group of House and Senate leaders, both the leadership and the leadership of the intelligence committees, that would be privy, one suspects, to such information. Do you have any idea what he's talking about?
Well, the president, you know, is the deflector in chief. Anything to change the subject from where the heat is. And as one who has been engaged in intelligence, a member of the Gang of Eight for a long time, I can tell you that it's just ridiculous for the President Trump, to say that President Obama would ever order any wiretap of an American citizen, any president. That's just we don't do that. And so this is, it's called a wrap-up smear. You make up something, and then you have the press write about it, and then you say everybody's writing about this charge. It's a tool of an authoritarian to just have you always be talking about what you want them to be talking about. Rather than Russia, we're talking about, did President Obama do thus and so? He certainly did not. And then to take it to the Congress and say, now you investigate this, when he's been not in favor of Congress investigating anything, including what do the Russians have on Donald Trump politically, financially, or personally. That's the truth that we want to know.
And that's the statement from Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, this morning, that President Trump's requesting, as part of their investigation into Russian activity, that the Congressional Intelligence Committee exercise their oversight authority to determine whether executive branch investigative powers were abused in 2016. Regardless of whether or not President Obama ordered such a wiretap, do you know if there was any such wiretap by the FBI or the Department of Justice?
Well, we wouldn't know that, but in fact, the very idea that President Trump is saying he wants his Justice Department to look into that, you don't look into something like that. In other words, if President Obama flat out has said, we have nothing to do with this. What the Justice Department is doing is another subject. I have no knowledge of anything of that kind.
You were asked on Friday if you've ever met with the Russian ambassador along the same ways that Jeff Sessions, the now Attorney General, was asked. This is what you had to say. Take a listen.
You've been in Congress a little bit, and you're in leadership. Have you ever met with the Russian ambassador?
I'm not with this Russian ambassador, no.
Photo of you in 2010 meeting with Ambassador Kislyak. It was part of a meeting that you had with Russian President Dmitry Medvedev at the time. I know there's a difference, and Senator Sessions...
Yes, a big difference.
Senator Sessions was under oath, and the meeting was far more recent than 2010. But is it not possible? I suspect this was an innocent mistake by you.
No. We were meeting with the president of Russia. He brought an entourage in with him.
Okay.
He was the one who was doing the talking. The question is, have you met with him? No, I haven't met with him. I met with the president of Russia. Who else is in his entourage? Who knows? Presidents, heads of state come in, they bring their party. They barely even introduce them. So this is completely different. But I want to say that in that meeting was the Republican leadership as well. So this wasn't just me meeting with Medvedev. It was a meeting of the House and the House bipartisan leadership with him. Who are the other people at the table? You'd have to ask the president of Russia. Could
somebody not say, you're parsing a little bit about your meeting with the president,
no,
even though the ambassador was there, and Jeff Sessions made the same kind of innocent mistake?
No.
You don't think so?
Are you kidding? Are you talking about, did I shake hands with him? I don't even know. Did I meet him? We're meeting with the ambassador at a time when the Russians are knowingly hacking our system. We know that. I said that at the convention in October, that I could prove that outside of the intelligence. So to waste any time on something like this is ridiculous. He was at the inauguration. Was I with him there? He probably was at the inauguration. Maybe he was going to be at the dinner last night. I've been in rooms of a couple hundred people where he has been. I don't know if you call that a meeting with him.
Okay. Hillary Clinton's inner circle is not happy with the way President Obama handled news about Russia's election hacking. They think he was being too cautious, President Obama. And one of Clinton's advisors told The New Yorker, quote, What if Barack Obama had gone to the Oval Office or the East Room of the White House and said, I'm speaking to you tonight to inform you that the United States is under attack. The Russian government at the highest levels is trying to influence our most precious asset, our democracy, and I'm not going to let it happen. The Clinton aide went on to say a large majority of Americans would have sat up and taken notice. Do you think, in retrospect, that President Obama handled this the right way?
I think that President Obama handled it as he received information that was of the highest confidence. I do think, with all the respect in the world for the press, that the press could have done a better job instead of printing every email that came out and saying, this comes to you from Vladimir Putin. They were, ha, 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 John Podesta said this or that. I think the press were accomplices in the undermining of our election by the Russians by not pointing out this stuff is worthless because it comes from an undermining of our election, or at least reminding the public where these emails, the leaking of these emails came from. So I can't speak to the timing of what President Obama said. I wish it had all happened in a time where the public could know that this had an impact on the election. A lot of things have an impact on the election. This certainly was one of them. But what's important to know is that it doesn't happen again, and that people in other countries realize what they are going to be susceptible to when the Russians come in to undermine their elections. This is a big picture of undermining democracies, not just in our country, although they like undermining ours. And they did have a vendetta against Hillary Clinton because she spoke about democracy and democratic elections and the rest. There's no question, personally, Vladimir Putin had a vendetta.
That's right, and the Russians are right now doing the same thing in some European countries, hoping to influence their elections. I want to move on to legislation.
Right.
In his speech to a joint session of Congress, President Trump renewed his commitment to child care and paid family leave. Take a listen.
My administration wants to work with members of both parties to make child care accessible and affordable, to help ensure new parents that they have paid family leave.
Paid family leave, a big Democratic priority for a long time. Is that something you could work with the president on?
Well, I would certainly hope so. The first conversation I had with him after the election, that week of the election, we talked about that subject, and it's a subject that his family is interested in as well.
Ivanka.
But what he has proposed is something that benefits, 70% of the benefits go to people making over $100,000 a year. So we have to revisit that this is not what this country needs in that regard. I do think that there's some bipartisanship where we can come together. It doesn't happen to be in his proposal.
Before you go, I need to ask you about a crude joke told by a Democratic member of Congress.
Before you go there, though, let me say about his speech. All of this that he's doing, the deflection, is to deflect from the fact that he does not have a jobs bill. He does not have an infrastructure bill. He does not have any of the things he talked about. Renegotiating NAFTA has not put Congress, made the communication with Congress on all of that. So understand this. This is the deflector where we started. The deflector in chief. No jobs, no infrastructure bill, no nothing, and no major bill signed since he came to the White House.
I need to ask you about this crude joke that was told this week by a member of your caucus, Democratic Congressman Cedric Richmond, at the Washington Press Club Foundation annual dinner at the expense of White House counselor Kellyanne Conway. Take a listen.
And you can just explain to me that circumstance, because she really looked kind of familiar in that position there.
So, Leader Pelosi, the joke was sexist. It was disgusting.
Right.
Shouldn't the congressman apologize to Kellyanne Conway? And honestly, where is the Democratic Party in expressing outrage about this?
But I wasn't at the dinner. I'm just finding out about this. But the fact is, I'm still in a sort of a state of what is going on here, that the person who occupies the White House is the person who was on that Hollywood video that said the crude things he said about women. You all are criticizing Cedric for something he said in the course of the evening, and he maybe should be criticized for that. I just don't know the particulars. But I do every day marvel at the fact that somebody who said the gross and crude things that President Trump said, he wouldn't even be allowed in a frat house, and he's in the White House.
Well, I think we've covered the Access Hollywood tape quite a bit, but I guess the question is, if one criticizes only Republicans when they make crude comments, does that not undermine the moral authority if they don't criticize when Democrats make crude comments?
I think everybody was making crude comments, and I just don't know. I wasn't at that dinner, but I was at the dinner last night at the Gridiron Club, and we were all, I think, quite, shall we say, respectable. I'll look at what my colleague said there, but I do think that in the Oval Office we were always with decorum appropriate for the White House.
Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure.
Thank you for being here this morning.